Hello and welcome to another jungle tutorial. I'm Virkayu, and in this video we are going to take a look at jungle matchups. We are going to talk about our champion select strategies, tools we can use to prepare for a matchup quickly, as well as what we should be thinking about as the game loads, and some specific examples putting all of this into context. Finally, I will talk about the advantages non-meta junglers can have in these fight situations. No matter your pick or your champion pool, you want to be aware of the matchup you're going into. Are you against a strong early game jungler, maybe an invader like Nidalee or Shaco? Maybe a counter jungling buff stealing tree like Ivern. It's important to know if you have the upper hand, especially versus a more passive lower HP clearing jungler that you can punish should you have the favorable matchup. But having a winning matchup doesn't mean anything if you don't know what advantages you have over the enemy. The best way to handle this is in bite-sized chunks that you get through experience by actually playing the game. Whether through normal, ranked, customs with friends, every time you have a new matchup, every time you face a new champion, you will learn something about them. Don't forget watching streams of people playing champions and roles you also play, along with YouTube guides in addition to using something like the LoL wiki to understand champion abilities, can all help in your learning process. An example of this is a very close 1v1 with Ornn and Kha'Zix. I know exactly what Kha'Zix can do, but he greatly underestimates what I can do as Ornn, in addition to the fact that I take fleet footwork in order to sustain in the jungle, giving me slightly higher attack speed than he would be used to. This is at the end of an actual fight we had previously where I just managed to escape with my flash, but because I see Kha'Zix coming around, I know to use my W before he actually can see me. This gives me the upper hand as I can auto attack him and E him against the wall, while his Q and W just isn't enough to kill me. My knowledge of Kha'Zix and Ornn allows me to win the fight because he just doesn't have that same knowledge. He understands Kha'Zix, but he probably doesn't see a lot of fleet footwork or in jungle. Ability knowledge and rune knowledge all adds into how you fight a 1v1 battle, specifically in this early game. Understanding that raw 1v1 jungle matchup can really determine the outcome of a game, all stemming from this early mid-game skirmishing and mind games that you'll be playing. For example, if your lanes are pushed in towards yourself and you want to maybe move for a gang or find where the enemy jungler is, if you happen to run into them in the river or on their side of the jungle, you won't have assistance from your laners and his laners will probably rotate quicker. Which means if you're stuck in a 1v1 fight and you cannot even fight in 1v1, it's probably going to end up badly for you. However, if you know you have that 1v1 advantage, maybe you can get a kill and get out before the laners are able to rotate. So with that in mind, let's begin by looking at how we process champion select. The premise of champion select in this video is to make the game easier and increase your chances of winning by making the right choices from the get-go. Now, if you are the first pick, you will have much less information to go on, but if your team is highlighting their choices, you can make your decisions based upon that. The essential information here is how much AD and AP does either team have. If your team is going Yasuo mid, as in this situation, you're hoping that the top laner takes something AP or the burden might fall to you. And in the jungle, we don't have many viable AP options. You should also consider whether your team needs more damage, tankiness, and perhaps even crowd control. Finally, based upon these questions, you should not be choosing from 20 possible champions to fit all these criteria, but instead have your 3 or 4 options that you are deciding to main at the moment and focus on in the current meta landscape. This will evolve and change as the patches go by and champions are buffed and nerfed, but if you look at your past 20 games on op.gg, you want to perhaps have 2 or 3 unique champions specifically for jungle. You don't want to be playing random stuff. The reason for this is that the more you focus on specific champions that suit your playstyle, the more you can focus on learning matchups as well as learning the jungle properly while refining the strengths on the champion you're playing. Over time, you will accumulate a large library of champions you can use because you would have been focusing on and improving specific things about those champions for a long time. Now usually you'll hear people say, you should play 1 to 3 champions, and the reason I suggested 4 is purely in the case that if all your options are banned or picked, then you have something as a backup. Now in this champion select, we have great dive and tankiness with Malphite and Yasuo, and we also have the Taric support. We have a hyper carry ADC who does mixed damage, which is excellent, and I see the enemy matchup for jungle is Nidalee, so I probably don't want to go Evelynn, because even though I can dominate against Nidalee later, if it's a good Nidalee and she moves in to apply significant invades and pressure, it can be really rough for me. Brand and Gragas are also tough matchups as they have stuns and knockbacks that can interrupt any potential combos. So in this case, I'll focus on my team comp and the enemy jungler matchup. If in this situation we had 0 tanks, I would ignore my earlier matchup with Nidalee and perhaps select a tank with knock-up CC like Sejuani, Zac, or my favorite Ornn jungle. However, as we do have tankiness, I instead go for Kai'Sa. At the time of this game, she was still very strong in the jungle, not so much after the recent nerfs. Now hold on. How are you meant to know all this when you're just choosing a champion in Cham Select? How are you meant to analyze so quickly what the enemy does and what you do and things like that? Well, there is no easy fix. and there's no way of knowing without learning, so I encourage you to use the tools available to you and focus in general on what your team needs, as well as with your 1v1 matchup with the enemy jungler. These tools can take the form of Lolalytics, which I use every lobby. I always like to see which champions counter the enemy jungler first and foremost. That's my first stop. I like to know if I have a stronger matchup there, if possible, in my champion pool. This gives me confidence in my 1v1 skirmishes as well as potential counter ganks and 2v2 situations. This can help refine my choice a little bit, and if I am first pick, I will usually go with what I feel most comfortable with at that point in time. Lolalytics also gives you win rates and popularity rates for items, runes, and skill orders. This can help you prep and lobby to make sure you have the best setup for the game, so always pay attention to your runes and customize them based upon what you're facing against the enemy and what your teammates have. Using something like the new Blitz app, and the link to this in Lolalytics will be in the description below, is very useful for scouting your team in the lobby as well as giving recommended builds, items, and skill orders. But it's also most useful for learning matchups, as there are actual tips given on what the enemy jungler does by presenting gameplay patterns and behaviors. For example, with Graves becoming the most popular jungler and being very strong, I used Lolalytics to see what junglers were good against him, and it showed that he had a lower win rate versus Kindred, a champ I know very well and like to play. And so whenever I see a Graves picked ahead of me, I usually just go with Kindred because I know I can beat him 1v1, I know his abilities and I know my abilities, and if I didn't, I could always check on the Lol wiki site very quickly just to see what exactly they did. And from there you can hopefully understand that, right, his Q is a skill shot. My Q is a dodge, so I can definitely use it to avoid his Q when he uses it, and his ultimate can be nullified with the Kindred ultimate, simply eradicating any potential fatal damage he might inflict. So along with using the Blitz app and the LoL wiki, a lot of this can be done in the loading screen or towards the end of champ select once you have an idea of what each team combo is going to give you. Yes, as a jungler, you should be analyzing the whole team and which possible lanes to gank by looking at CC and such things, but you also need to know first and foremost what you're dealing with at the start in terms of pressure and invades. So let's move on to the loading screen. You perhaps are playing Kindred into Rengar, a matchup I think is pretty interesting because it's really determined on what cooldowns you each have at the time, as well as positioning. So through your own experience, perhaps LoL Wiki, Blitz app, or whatever you use, you can gather the following information. These are just a few samples I've thrown up in a player style versus cut to give you an idea of what you could be considering. So typically you'll notice that Kindred has much larger cooldowns and that Rengar's ultimate is lower than Kindred's. So if Rengar is able to pounce on Kindred and they use their ult to stop the cat's damage, you know the next time Rengar's ultimate is up, that Kindred will be extremely vulnerable and won't be able to ult out that damage. Both champions have scaling in the game through Marks and Bonetooth, so they both have nice late games. If you are playing a matchup you aren't too knowledgeable about, you can use whatever tools I've mentioned to give you an advantage in game, and then regardless of whether you lose or win, you would have learned that matchup and gained experience around it. But let's give a few examples of how this particular matchup can pan out when we both know what's going on. Important to note is your general idea of the enemy's first clear, but to discuss these things in depth in the first blood video as well as the first clear efficiency video, which I'll also put in the description. The first example here is that I already know to avoid any unwatered bushes and do my best to track Rengar because of this. I meet up with him in the river roughly early game level 3-4 and we do see each other. What he doesn't know is that I see him waiting in a watered bush around the mid lane while I am a level up. My mid AP Nasus has pushed the wave and so technically we could collapse and 2v1 him. However, Rengar understands his own champion as well as the matchup and throws a ward over the wall which I actually see placed. Now if I was to collapse on him, I know that he'll simply bush jump to me and perhaps combo me easily before Nasus can help. I keep my distance and eventually do decide to back off because the dog has no interest in the cat. A few minutes later I know that Rengar started red and I see that it is sporting soon. I figured this is a good chance to get some summoners burnt on the bottom lane and perhaps set up a gank when I'm level 6. We do manage to get the Morg to burn a flash and Caitlyn panic heals for some reason. Excellent, good gank. I then tank the arrogant pathing back to my own red and a sudden Rengar appears, I flash like an ape and I'm dead. Clever warding by the enemy and perhaps a bait by the Rengar anticipating this move makes me a first blood victim. It was played well by him and poorly by me. I should have walked away from the bush and respected his jump in case he was there, as he wouldn't have been able to contest my red with the vision up and the fact that his bottom lane was not pushed against their own tower. However, we get redemption a little later and I catch Rengar taking my scuttle mark and I know that it's in the open field, there are no nearby bushes with which he can use to turn on me. So I make sure to focus on hitting my E to slow him, and I chase him down with my W and Q, which gets that shorter CD while I'm in the W, which you would know about if you did your research beforehand. There's no response that he can have to that fight, and I get a revenge kill. So how else can general champion matchup knowledge help us in the jungle from a pure 1v1 perspective? Well, using replays and streamers is most important. If you face someone and you just don't know how they're getting around the map, maybe you don't know what they're doing, go watch a replay and see what clears they take, see how the champions kite, how much damage they take, learn about other junglers' clear times and health parameters, and you can use that to your advantage in the future. You need to know through learning and experience which champions are slower clearers and perhaps weaker against you. For example, I know Evelyn extremely well, so when someone picks her, I know how to punish it because I know her first clear pathing. Here I'm Graves, and I've already seen her retreat back into the jungle from a gank she just tried. I see the W used on Grump, and now I know that gives me more than enough time to chase her down because she won't be able to see me at all and loses that burst part of her damage. Free kill, free Grump, happy jungler with a cigar. Even if I'm playing something off meta like Ornn, the fact that I know what Evelyn will be doing before she does means I can happily run into her in the river and chase her down. I know my kit, I know her kit, and she probably has no idea what I'm doing. I have a Zoe mid who knows to use the bubble to CC the Evan also. I also don't use my E at all because if she flashes, I'll have nothing to catch her with. But in the event she does flash out, I can always flash E to secure against the wall and we'll get the kill regardless. So I'm also patient and reacting to her plays because I hold all the cards in this fight. Free kill, free raptors, happy Ornn. Both these aggressive moves are made because I know my abilities, I know their abilities, and I know what my teammates can do. This is all knowledge gathered over time, watching streams and using the resources I mentioned earlier. And when you play a non-meta champion, the enemy will often not know exactly what you can do in the jungle. It might lead them to be arrogant, ignorant, over-aggressive, maybe too safe. Now I probably wouldn't pick Zyra in a do or die series in Diamond or something like that, because any strong meta jungler who is aware of what Zyra does would easily crush me, but my enemy did pick Kindred thinking they could counter me, and probably thought, hey, Zyra jungle, that's an easy matchup, I'll just invade her, red, and crush her. Well, I play a lot of Kindred, I'm already thinking of these things. I'm also concerned about denying every single mark I can. So what I do is, I set myself up to collapse on their red when they do come down. I 3-cap my bot side, I make sure to secure the scuttle, and I wait patiently at the red buff. And even though I have auto attack enabled and I hit the red buff like a dodo, I do manage to hit my E on the Kindred and the red. I know the limits of Zyra, and the Kindred can't do anything about it. Couple auto attacks, few spells, and I have a first blood. Arrogance of the matchup punished by their ignorance of it. This happens to me as well though. Trundle's just in your face. I really don't like that champion. I think he's a little bit overtuned, but what do I know? So I fail here in the Kai'Sa vs Trundle matchup. I do my standard blue Gromp and head towards my red, and while Trundle merely wanted to cheese my red, he didn't expect my Kai'Sa clear to be so fast, so we're both sort of surprised to meet each other at the red. This forces him to smite it to get it away from me, but because I had zero idea he's there, I did know he started blue, but I didn't know he was cheesing. I'm basically in melee range, and I become that which I hate, a first blood victim. On the other side of the coin, when I am against an Amumu, I can use my power to do the same thing to him. And you'll see a few other examples in the rest of the video where matchup knowledge can net you kills advantages at level 3, level 4, and especially even outside of the early game when you're trying to survive tower dives 2v1. Even though I did focus on the early game in this video mostly because it's so crucial when deciding the ganks and pressures you can apply to lanes, your understanding of what champions do, what they want to win, and how you can counter those with your own champion and team comp is vital. Early game wins are great, but only if you further know how to use those advantages and keep pressure over your matchups. Okay, that was an insanely dense video with a lot of information, examples, and generalizations thrown at you, so I hope it was at least structured in a way you could somewhat follow what I was saying. It's very difficult to sort of take one jungle and match him up against someone else and analyze it in depth. I mean, that could take 10-20 minutes by itself if you wanted to do it fully. So what I'm thinking of doing is adding a different kind of video where I do that over time, but we'll see. No promises, depends on my schedule. Anyway, I do hope it helped you. I do hope you're able to learn something and use the resources I presented. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate all the support so far. Please like, comment, and share. If you did learn something, subscribe for more jungle videos coming soon. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.